My name is Rachel, and for 35 years, my family saw me as the walking emergency fund. The reliable one. The quiet one you only call when a crisis needs a paycheck. They never asked about my day, they only asked about my balance. This Thanksgiving in the Hamptons was supposed to be another performance. But I had a plan. I didn't know they would hand me the perfect moment to trigger it on a silver platter right between the cranberry sauce and the glazed ham. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Let me know your story down in the comments. The air in my parents' sprawling waterfront estate was thicker than the gravy. And it smelled like expensive pine needles and quiet desperation. Every Thanksgiving at the Bell House was a beautifully staged play where everyone had a role to master. My mother, Stephanie, was the director. She had the perfect socialite hair, the perfect designer linens, and a gift for telling the perfect lies. My father, Gregory, was the stoic patriarch, nodding along to whatever narrative kept the country club dues paid and the champagne flowing. I arrived in my simple sedan, a car they constantly urged me to trade in for something less embarrassing to the neighborhood aesthetic. I carried one carefully wrapped gift. A donation made in the family's name, to a local literacy charity. I knew they would hate it. To them, a gift that didn't come in a heavy blue box wasn't a gift at all. But that was the point. The house was a monument to borrowed glamour. The crystal caught the light and fractured it into 1,000 sparkling lies. It all looked like old money. And it was. I just knew for a fact that none of them had actually paid for it. Rachel. Darling. You're late. My mother chirped, air kissing my cheek without actually making contact. Her eyes swept over my simple navy dress like she was auditing a line item she didn't approve of. You look comfortable, she added. That was socialite speak for you look poor. I offered her the gift and watched her smile tighten as she felt its lightweight nature. How thoughtful. Put it with the others, she said, gesturing toward a mountain of lavish boxes that made mine look like a pauper at a palace ball. I followed her into the dining room. But I stopped when I saw her leaning in toward my aunt. Her voice was a low, practiced whisper. But I have spent a lifetime learning to hear the sharp edges in her tone. Poor Rachel, my mother whispered, her hand fluttering to her pearls. She's been so fragile lately. Ever since that little health scare. She's been hoarding her money. It's a classic sign of instability. She's become quite paranoid, thinking everyone is out to get her savings. I stood there, invisible as usual, and felt the familiar poison of her gaslighting surge through me. She wasn't just being mean, she was setting the stage. She was preemptively labeling me as mentally unfit, so that when the shakedown started later, any refusal I gave would be dismissed as a symptom of my breakdown. To the room, I was the ungrateful daughter losing her grip. To them, I was a balance sheet that had finally stopped yielding a return. For years, I had provided the security they mocked. I had been the silent investor in their version of family. I paid for the bailouts, the bad investments, and the lifestyle they couldn't afford. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for a decade. But as I watched Stephanie continue her whisper campaign, I didn't feel the urge to cry. I didn't feel the need to defend myself. I just felt the cold, clinical clarity of a forensic auditor. This wasn't a holiday. It was a crime scene. And I was finally ready to stop hiding the evidence. I found my father, Gregory, in his study, already pouring a double scotch. Brandon, my older brother and the family's resident genius, was lounging in a leather wingback chair, his designer watch glinting under the library lights. He looked every bit the high-stakes entrepreneur he claimed to be. But all I could see was a man whose previous 3 ventures were only still afloat because I had quietly backstopped his credit lines. Brandon gave me a dismissive nod as I walked in. It's complex. Rachel, he said, his voice dripping with condescension when I asked about his new business. Market analytics. Artificial intelligence-driven behavior prediction. We're calling it the Legacy Fund. We're seeking Series B funding from some very exclusive circles. Gregory beamed at him, then looked at me as if I were the help. A steady job managing trusts for the wealthy is good for you. Rachel, he said. Security? That was their favorite word for my life. To them, my stability wasn't an achievement, it was an available resource for their exploitation. I sat there, watching them, and I realized for the first time that I had been living in a house of mirrors for a decade. People often ask why someone like me, an estate trust manager who handles millions for strangers, would let her own family drain her dry. They call it weakness. They call it a lack of a backbone. But it wasn't that simple. I was a survivor of an emotional architecture designed to keep me compliant. It was like being in a prison without bars. For 10 years, they had constructed a world where my only value was what I could provide. They didn't lock me in a cell, they locked me in a narrative where leaving meant I was the villain. Every time I tried to say no, they used the language of blood and loyalty like a garrote. They had conditioned me through a psychological mechanism called learned helplessness, the invisible chains of a survivor who eventually stops looking for the exit because the family has convinced her that the outside world is a cliff. I wasn't submitting out of love. I was surviving a cage they had built with my own paycheck. We moved into the dining room, and the table was a monument to their arrogance. Silver platters, crystal that cost more than my first 2 years of college, and a meal that smelled of salt and betrayal. Brandon's wife, Victoria, was already seated, rearranging her designer napkin and checking her reflection in a soup spoon. She was the perfect trophy for a man who owned nothing but the debt I was currently securing. As the plates were set, I could feel the energy in the room shifting. Gregory cleared his throat, the universal signal that the shakedown was beginning. I looked at the ivory dress I had chosen for this occasion. It was a shroud for the person I used to be. The audit was over. The forensic report was complete. And the Bells were about to find out that the silent investor had just revoked their access. As the dessert plates were being cleared, my father cleared his throat. It was the signal. All eyes turned to him as he leaned back. The picture of a man in control. Now, while we're all together, and in the spirit of generosity, he began, his voice oozing that false warmth I had learned to despise. We have a small family matter to discuss. A little opportunity for our Rachel to truly join the inner circle. Brandon leaned forward, his eyes hungry. My legacy fund hit a minor snag, he said, trying to sound nonchalant. The lead investor pulled out. But it's a blessing in disguise. We just need a bridge loan, a temporary infusion of $250,000 to get us to the next milestone. He looked directly at me, his smile not reaching his eyes. Rachel, you've got that sitting in your savings. Right. You never spend anything on yourself. It's just sitting there, being wasted. The room went silent. Victoria nodded encouragingly, her diamond earrings catching the light. My mother looked at me with those wide, pleading eyes she used whenever she wanted to drown me in guilt. It would mean so much. Rachel, for your brother's future, for the Bell legacy. I took a slow sip of water. The cold liquid grounded me. No, I said. The word was small. But in that silent dining room, it sounded like a gunshot. My father's mask slipped. What do you mean? No, I mean I won't be providing a bridge loan, I said, my voice steady. The money isn't just sitting there. It's working. And it's no longer available for your lifestyle subsidies. Brandon scoffed, his face reddening. Working, In your little credit union account, come on. Rachel. Don't be selfish. This is family. Selfish. I repeated. And I felt the word like a cold coin on my tongue. I have given this family over $750,000 in fraudulent links and direct subsidies over the last decade. Not one penny has been repaid. That isn't a family dynamic, it's a parasitic subscription. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. My mother's hand fluttered to her throat. Rachel. That is a horrible way to look at things. We're not a business. We help each other. Do we? I asked. Looking at each of them. When have you ever helped me? My father slammed his hand on the table, making the crystal jump. Enough. This is embarrassing. Your constant penny pinching. Your lack of ambition. We ask for one meaningful contribution to your brother's success. And you behave like this. Stop begging us for understanding and just do your duty. I almost laughed. The projection was so perfect it was artistic. For years, Gregory Bell had viewed my career as an estate trust manager as glorified housekeeping, a gendered role meant for someone who didn't have the vision for big business. He thought he could bully me because he mistook my quiet diligence for a lack of intelligence. But trust law isn't about vision, it's about the precision of control. And he was about to learn that my professional grit was lethal. You're right, I said, placing my napkin neatly on the table. This is embarrassing. I reached into the pocket of my dress and took out my phone. The room watched. Confused. I didn't look at them. I found the number I had saved under a simple contact, Plan B. I put the phone on speaker and set it in the center of the table, right next to the gravy boat. The line rang twice. A crisp, professional voice answered. This is Margaret speaking. Account verification. Please. I leaned toward the phone. My voice clear and clinical. Freeze account. Code final, 27. There was a brief pause on the line. The click of a keyboard confirmed the kill. Margaret's voice echoed in the hushed room. Primary holdings frozen as per directive. All linked subsidiary accounts and authorized user access are now suspended. Would you like the secondary action initiated? I looked up, meeting my father's widening eyes. Yes, I said, never breaking my gaze. Initiate it now. The word initiate seemed to hang in the air like a tiny bomb that had already gone off somewhere they couldn't see, but could feel in the sudden chill. Within seconds, the dinner turned into chaos. Brandon's phone buzzed on the table. Then my father's in his pocket. Then my mother's from the living room. A chirping melody that suddenly sounded like an alarm. My parents froze. The liars were finally being exposed by the very technology they used to rob me. Their rented arrogance was over. The silence that followed was heavy and cold. My father didn't answer my mother's frantic questioning. He just sat there, staring at me, his eyes wide and the color draining from his skin as the pieces clicked into place in his mind. He realized I wasn't just being difficult. I was being terminal. Brandon, ever the slow learner, just looked furious. Did you just freeze your own money to spite us? That is the most pathetic, petulant thing I have ever heard. He spat. Not my accounts. Brandon, I interrupted, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. Your accounts, the ones linked to mine, the ones with the authorized user cards in your wallets, the lines of credit in your name that are backed by my assets, the family liability accounts, as my bank so accurately labels them. Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrows shot up. She looked at Brandon with a flicker of real panic in her eyes for the first time. The platinum card. Brandon, you said it was from the venture capital. Brandon opened his mouth, but the arrogant entrepreneur mask had finally cracked. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a slim folder. I had been documenting every single transaction for 8 months. Every loan. Every guilt-induced transfer. Every time I had paid a bill that wasn't mine. The paper trail was a novel of betrayal. I slid a single sheet toward my aunt. It was a bank statement from last month. The account was in my name and my father's. The list of transactions was a catalog of their Life Country Club dues, payments to a luxury car lease company, and thousands in charges from high-end department stores. I pointed to the authorized user cards ending in 0004 for Gregory and 0005 for Stephanie. My savings account, which used to hold over $450,000, was now linked as security for this line of credit. Its current balance was $15,000. My mother snatched the paper, her eyes scanning the numbers. Her hand began to tremble. "You had no right to look at this," she whispered. "This is private. This is your father's management of our family assets." "My assets?" "Mom," I said softly. "The ones you told me to conserve. The safety net you mocked while you were quietly burning it for fuel." Then, I dropped the final hammer. I told them what I had discovered at the city library. The second mortgage I knew about was actually a third. The house was leveraged to its picturesque eaves. But more interesting were the permits. Over the last 2 years, Gregory had filed for extensive renovations, a new roof, a new heating and cooling system, a kitchen remodel, work that had never been done. The money, $750,000 in total, had been siphoned through a shell company into Brandon's failing fund and my father's gambling portal. They hadn't just been spending my money, they had been committing loan fraud using my name as the shaky foundation. Gregory's phone rang. It was the country club. He silenced it, his face ashen. "You forged my signature on those original linkage documents 5 years ago. Didn't you, Dad?" I asked. The question hung in the air, more shocking to the room than anything else. I took out my phone and sent a prearranged signal to Naomi Sinclair, my attorney. "Dinner is served." Naomi was already executing the next phase. Formal legal notifications to the bank, a forensic audit, an adult protective services referral for financial exploitation. The Bell's high-class world was officially in a legal meltdown. I stood up, feeling tall and solid. I gathered my single unwrapped gift from under the tree. My aunt reached out and touched my arm. "Rachel, where will you go?" I gave her a real smile. Small but warm. "Home. Aunt Helen. I'm finally going home." I walked out of the dining room through the foyer with its glittering chandelier that was probably on a payment plan linked to my frozen credit line. I didn't look back. The peace of my apartment was a physical relief. No curated scent of pine. No tension, humming beneath festive music, just the soft hum of the refrigerator. A lullaby of normalcy. I placed the charity gift on my clean, sparse counter and took a deep, shaking breath. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a hollow ache in its wake. I had just dynamited the bridge to my family. And even though it was a bridge built on lies, the emptiness where it used to be was staggering. The confrontation I expected came 3 days later. My apartment intercom buzzed, and my mother's face on the screen was a shock. The perfectly coiffed hair was disheveled. Her makeup was gone. She looked 10 years older and desperately afraid. Against my better judgment, I buzzed her in. I stood in my doorway, blocking the entrance as she and my father emerged from the elevator. They looked like the wreckage of a storm they had spent a lifetime pretending didn't exist. "The bank. Rachel," my father whispered, his voice gray and gravelly. "They're saying the renovations were never done. They're talking about loan fraud. They gave us a notice of default. They're taking the house." My mother wrung her hands. Real tears carving tracks through her pale skin. We have 3 weeks. We have nowhere to go. We need a deposit on an apartment. Something to start over. Please. Rachel. You have the money. Just one last transfer. I looked at them. And for the first time, I saw the truth of the module I had been studying in my own life, the power illusion of an empty wallet. For decades, I had mistaken their arrogance for authority. I thought their confidence came from a place of strength. But standing there, I realized their high-class status was just a mask they had been renting with my credit. Their position in society, the country club smiles, the socialite poise, it was all a luxury they couldn't afford on their own. When I cut the financial tether, their entire internal foundation collapsed because there was no character underneath the cash flow. Their arrogance had been a subscription service. And the bill had finally come due. No, I said. My voice was quiet but absolute in the empty hallway. You can't fix a decade of fraud with one more transfer. The house is a paper fortress. And you are the ones who set it on fire. I reached back inside my apartment, grabbed a thick manila envelope, and handed it to my father. It was the formal foreclosure notice from First Metropolitan Bank and a summary of the Adult Protective Services finding. I already did help you. I told him. I helped the bank find the truth. I helped the state document the exploitation. I helped you find the consequences you've been running from since I was 22. My father looked at the documents. Then at me. His face turning a dark, ugly red. If you walk away now, you are dead to this family, he hissed. I met his gaze and felt a final, glorious release. I was dead to you a long time ago. Dad, I said softly, you just forgot to stop spending my inheritance. I closed the door. The sound of the lock engaging was a firm, a final click. I heard a muffled sob from the hallway. Then the sound of them stumbling toward the elevator. I leaned against the wood, my own breath coming in short gasps. The Bell estate wasn't a home anymore. It was a physical manifestation of a bad debt. They weren't shocked by what they had done. They were only shocked that I had finally stopped playing along. The Pacific Ocean was nothing like the Hamptons. I had pictured postcard calm. But my first sight of it, from the cliffside highway, was a roaring, endless expanse of gray-green power, throwing itself against the rocks with a sound like a perpetual, mighty sigh. It wasn't peaceful. It was alive. It felt like a truth I finally needed to hear. My new apartment was small, a studio with a view of other buildings, but it had large windows that filled the space with the unique, soft light of the coast. The first night, I slept on a camping mattress, surrounded by boxes. And I slept more deeply than I had in years. There was no background hum of dread. No anticipation of the next demand. Just the unfamiliar silence of a city where no one knew my name, my past, or what they could take from me. Starting the new job was a gentle shock to my system. At the community college, I wasn't Rachel, the human automated teller machine, or Rachel, the disappointing daughter. I was Professor Bell, the new head of the Financial Empowerment Initiative. My students were single parents, retirees wanting a second act, and young adults navigating their first bank accounts. They looked at me not with expectation, but with curiosity, and some with hope. I taught them about compound interest, but also about the psychology of spending, about setting boundaries, and about the difference between a want and a need. With every lesson, I felt like I was healing a part of myself. I bought furniture piece by piece, choosing things I loved, a deep blue sofa, a sturdy desk, and a shelf for my books. I didn't consult anyone's taste, but my own. A week before my move, I had been clearing out a closet when I found a small, dusty box labeled in my grandmother's handwriting, For Rachel's dreams. I had forgotten about it. She had given it to me when I graduated college, telling me to open it only when I felt truly lost. I sat on the floor and opened it. Inside weren't valuables, but a handwritten note. My clever girl. It said, "Don't let the world make you small. Your mind is your greatest fortune. Use it to build a life that feels like sunshine." Beneath the note were a few old savings bonds she had bought me as a child. Now matured. They weren't worth a fortune, but together they were enough for a down payment on a reliable car for my cross-country drive. It felt like a vote of confidence from the only person who had ever truly seen me. Naomi Sinclair kept me updated from afar. The foreclosure on my parents' estate was finalized. They moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex on the far side of the city. Brandon's legacy fund was exposed as a hollow shell, and he eventually took a salary job in middle management at a tech firm, a massive blow to his self-styled visionary identity. According to the last legal filing, they were making payments on a structured settlement to repay a fraction of the funds they had taken. I had insisted the money be paid not to me, but to a debt relief charity. I didn't want their money. I wanted the principal acknowledged in a court of law. And it was. I don't hate my family. I have simply moved beyond them to a place where they are no longer the defining geography of my heart. They are a historical footnote. A cautionary tale of what happens when love is twisted into a transaction. My quiet nation is now open for connection, but only on mutual ground. To those of you listening who always feel like you're on the edge, this is for you. Maybe you're in the middle of your own holiday disaster right now. Maybe the lies are being told right to your face, and the people who should love you are nodding along. Maybe you feel like you're begging just to be seen while they call you selfish for wanting to keep what is yours. I'm here to tell you that the quiet inside you, that voice that says, "This is wrong," that's not weakness. That's your strength whispering. You can build a new shore. You can found your own quiet nation. It starts with choosing yourself. Not out of spite, but out of survival. And then, one day, you do it out of love. The truth has a weight, but you don't have to carry their lies anymore. You can set them down. You can walk away. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to choose between your family and your freedom, share your story in the comments. You aren't alone. Subscribe to join our community of survivors. Now go live your truth, it's waiting for you.